This hearing will now come to order. Thank you all for participating. As this hearing is fully virtual, we must address a few housekeeping matters. For today's meeting, the chair or staff designated by the chair may mute participants' microphones when they are not under recognition for the purpose of eliminating inadvertent background noise. Members are responsible for muting and unmuting themselves, and if I notice you've not unmuted yourself, I'll ask if you would like the staff to unmute you. If you indicate approval by nodding, staff will unmute your microphone. I remind all members and witnesses that the 5-minute clock still applies. If there's a technology issue, we will move to the next member until the issue is resolved, and you will retain the balance of your time. You'll notice a clock on your screen that will show how much time is remaining. At 1 minute remaining, the clock will turn to yellow. At 30 seconds remaining, I'll gently tap the gavel to remind members that their time is almost expired. And when your time has expired, the clock will turn red, and I'll begin to politely recognize the next member. In terms of the speaking order, we'll follow the order set forth in the House rules, beginning with the chair and ranking member. Then members present at the time the hearing is called to order will be recognized in order of seniority. And finally, members not present at the time the hearing is called to order. Finally, House rules require me to remind you that we've set up an email address to which members can send anything they wish to submit, but do so in writing at any of our hearings or markups. That email address has been provided in advance to your staffs. I will now recognize myself for 5 minutes for my opening statement. Again, let me extend a warm welcome to all of our members and distinguished witnesses. Today, we will discuss how domestic manufacturing will anchor the Build Back Better agenda. The clean energy future of our nation and our ability to reboot and energize the domestic manufacturing economy depends on the Department of Energy's programs for inventing the future. We must create and even bring back good-paying jobs here at home. Addressing climate change is our portal to sustain life on Earth for generations to come. Headlines coast to coast tell the story. The Earth is warming. The rate of increase of damaging weather events is unrelenting. We personally experience, our colleagues experience, the impacts of this historic change. If we fail to address this hastening crisis, it is to our collective peril. As we discussed at our first hearing, technologies and innovations are already helping address climate change. They have led to widespread deployment, consumer savings, and good-paying jobs. For example, solar installations in the year 2020 set a new record, and there's now enough solar to power 17,700,000 American homes. For motor vehicles, 98% of the gasoline sold in the United States includes 10% ethanol, showing that renewable fuels as the future of agriculture, while we watch agriculture positioned to plant millions of acres of crop cover to absorb more carbon while restoring and regenerating soils with higher nutrient content. Clean energy jobs are the future. American solar jobs have increased 167% over the last decade, and according to environmental entrepreneurs, clean energy workers earn an average median wage of $23.89 an hour, 25% higher than the national median wage. Clean energy sector jobs are more likely unionized and come with better health care and retirement benefits. Beyond installation jobs, our nation must manufacture the wind turbines and solar panels here in the United States. We must squarely meet predatory competition posed by nations like China that do not hesitate to steal intellectual property. Our efforts must be dedicated to commercializing new technologies for electric vehicles and, obviously, hydrogen fuel cells. We must reinvent and retool our transportation and our domestic vehicle industry and produce those vehicles here at home. I applaud President Joe Biden for pointing out serious shortages of domestically produced silicon chips impacting our manufacturing supply chain. And while we continue to pursue innovation for new age energy technologies like advanced nuclear, carbon capture, hydrogen, and efficient grid transmission, we must plan ahead strategically so those industries and jobs are based here in America. Employment in U.S. manufacturing has continued to decline from 17.3 million jobs in 2000 to 12.2 million jobs in 2020. And that is why we must urgently make the investments in clean energy manufacturing, and infrastructure to provide a much-needed opportunity for job creation and real wealth generation is distinct from financial markets that surpassed manufacturing as the key sector of corporate profits starting back in 1995. Innovation will be critical to developing strategies for transforming energy-intensive processes, like the buildings all around us, the ones we're sitting in, like the facilities that process water and wastewater, along with energy-intensive sectors and industries like steel, cement, refining, and auto and truck production. Investing in manufacturing will create jobs for electricians, welders, solar installers, roofers, plumbers, pipe fitters, engineers, steam fitters, boiler makers, and many others. Training must be extended for workers too often left behind, so their skill levels will translate to a number of jobs. And I'm elated that President Biden supports a national strategy to develop a low-carbon manufacturing economy, and Secretary of Energy Granholm has been promoting place-based investment plans to help regions that have been falling behind. As you can see in the map, manufacturing job losses have disproportionately harmed specific places. We must create jobs that reinvest in areas and workers who too often have been left behind, including manufacturing workers in rural communities and blue-collar workers in industries that have closed or been outsourced. As people and communities succeed, so will America. To our witnesses, we look forward to hearing from you, and I'll now turn to our very capable ranking member, Mr. Simpson, for opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairwoman Capter. I'm happy to join you once again on the Energy and Water Appropriations Subcommittee as we start this new Congress. I'd like to echo your welcome to our witnesses. We thank you all for participating today and look forward to hearing your perspectives on domestic manufacturing for a clean energy future. Strengthening domestic manufacturing to keep and create good-paying jobs here in the United States is important. It is especially relevant when the technology to be manufactured was developed here and when it was developed with federal taxpayer dollars. The Department of Energy's Advanced Manufacturing Office directly supports investigation of new manufacturing technologies. Several other programs also support efforts that could benefit domestic manufacturing and reduced industrial emissions. For instance, the Office of Nuclear Energy is working to demonstrate producing hydrogen at existing nuclear power plants. Hydrogen as a fuel source has a great potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, especially when the hydrogen is produced from clean sources like nuclear energy. This process can also help extend the viability of nuclear reactors, which are a good source of clean baseload power for the electrical grid. To truly support domestic manufacturing, we must recognize that there are hurdles beyond the jurisdictions of this subcommittee. Hurdles beyond technology development, intellectual property must also be protected. Regulatory overreach must be corrected, and we must not rely so heavily on foreign sources for critical materials. The Trump administration initiated strong efforts to address these issues, and we must continue and further strengthen these measures supporting domestic manufacturing. I look forward to further exploring these issues with our witnesses. I thank Chairwoman Capter for calling this hearing and look forward to hearing from our witnesses. Thank you.
I thank our ranking member very much, and like him, I'm very excited for our witnesses joining us here today, and I welcome your observation of how innovation in the energy field can confront the challenges of climate change while creating more and better jobs in manufacturing. First, we will have Dr. Pat Choate. Dr. Choate is Director of the Manufacturing Policy Project. An economist and development strategist, Dr. Choate has served on several presidential and congressional commissions, served as Vice President of Public Policy at TRW Corporation, a high-tech international conglomerate, served as economic advisor to commissions in Oklahoma and Tennessee, and has given expert testimony before Congress numerous times, and is an author of 9 books, and has worked with, is probably a preeminent expert on patents, trade, and infrastructure. Additionally, he's worked on and advised numerous national and regional economic development organizations. Next, we will have Ms. Roxanne Brown, the International Vice President at Large, United Steelworkers. Ms. Brown oversees the union's public policy and legislative agenda, as well as its political work. She has represented the steelworkers with global policymakers, including at the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And she was a founding steering committee member of the renowned Blue-Green Alliance. Following that, we will have Mr. Tim Cortis, the Chief Technology Officer of Plug Power. Plug Power is a leading hydrogen and fuel cell company. Mr. Cortis is responsible for the company's long-term technology strategy and vision, and prior to joining Plug Power, Mr. Cortis served as Chief Technology Officer and Vice President of Engineering at Smiths Power. And finally, we will have Dr. Thomas Kerfus, who is the Chief Manufacturing Officer and Interim Director of the Manufacturing Science Division at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Dr. Kerfus is responsible for the strategic planning for advanced manufacturing at Oak Ridge, and he has significant experience in production operations, manufacturing systems, and policy issues related to advanced manufacturing. Thank you. Thank you all for taking the time to be with us today. Without objection, your written statements will be entered into the record. Please feel free to summarize your remarks in about 5 minutes each, and we will start with Dr. Choate.
Makes 5 points. First, inefficient buildings are our largest source of greenhouse emissions. 2, several new technologies are available or soon will be available that will allow us to tackle the climate crisis at scale, quickly, and cost effectively. I will describe one such. 3, these new technologies can help cities realize significant amounts of new revenues through savings. 4, manufacturing and installing these technologies offers a real chance to create millions of good, new, long-term American jobs. And 5, where these factories are located can help reduce the massive regional inequality that has emerged over the past 4 decades. To the first point, both the U.S. Department of Energy and the United Nations report that energy inefficient buildings create more unwanted emissions than all transportation combined. That is cars, trains, planes, ships, and they create more emissions than all industry combined. In New York City, 70% of greenhouse emissions are from buildings. Moreover, 90% of those buildings will still be in use 30 years from now. And this concentration is a good thing for dealing with climate change, as I will explain later. Fixing our cities now, therefore, is essential. 3, important new clean climate technologies are close to commercialization or at the early stage of deployment. Over the past decade, I've worked with many of those inventors and highlight one such technology in my testimony. Specifically, thermal heat extraction from raw sewage can harvest massive amounts of clean energy and for cooling and heating through heat pumps while emanating zero carbon emissions. Think geothermal. But instead of holes drilled into the earth, which is invasive and expensive, the heat is drawn from sewer wastewater, which uses existing sewer lines, is inexpensive, and is quick. A striking demonstration of this technology exists 1/3 of a mile from the Capitol at the new DC Water headquarters. In a 3-year-old, 151,000 square foot smart glass building sitting atop a 100-year-old sewer pumping station, the heat used to cool and heat the building is drawn from the wastewater. DC Water saves more than $100,000 annually for its heating and cooling. It also saves more than 1.5 million gallons of fresh water that otherwise would have been used in air conditioning and cooling towers. Most pertinent, this waste heat system emits zero greenhouse emissions. Third point, if this technology is linked by a loop to many buildings on the same sewer system, major new revenues can be created for cities' water and sewer authorities. This is really important. 4, creating a clean climate necessitates that these climate technologies and machines be manufactured and installed. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of new jobs can be created. I argue that these machines should be manufactured in the USA and the jobs filled by American workers. No offshoring on this. 5th, and finally, Where this manufacturing is located offers the Congress and the President a direct means to confront America's growing regional inequality. Today, regional inequality is out of control. Between the early 1930s and the end of the 1970s, incomes converged towards a high single American standard of living. But since the late 1970s, the inequality between a few locations at the expense of other regions has soared. The Community Distress Index referenced in my testimony reveals this. Where the nation chooses to locate these new factories and jobs can help directly reverse regional inequality. In sum, climate change is the most dangerous threat the United States has faced in generations, but it is also a massive manufacturing and jobs opportunity. And it offers an almost once in a generation opportunity to reverse the worsening regional inequality, in essence, to reinforce a fading American dream. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Choate, very much. Ms. Brown, please begin.
Thank you, Chairwoman Capter and Ranking Member Simpson and members of the subcommittee. My name is Roxanne Brown, and I'm honored to serve as International Vice President at Large for the United Steelworkers Union. Chairwoman Capter, I send special greetings to you from the over 600 USW members at the Portsmouth Gaseous Diffusion Facility in Piketon, Ohio. You and the subcommittee have been strong and consistent champions for them and the work they do, and our union can't thank you enough. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the critical role domestic manufacturing and its workers play in the transition to a clean energy economy. Done correctly, America can recover from this economic crisis stronger than ever before, having maintained and created millions of good union manufacturing jobs. As the largest industrial union in North America, the Steelworkers Union has members concentrated in energy-intensive, trade-exposed industries that produce primary commodity products. We want to ensure that manufacturing and our members, some of whom should be appearing on the screen now, are not overlooked in the development of clean energy policy. Their industries and the products they make are essential for the reconstruction of our failing infrastructure systems. But these industries are also uniquely at risk of emissions and jobs leakage absent sufficient policies to prevent that leakage. Addressing climate change not only meets our environmental principles, but can also drive job and production growth in the United States. For our union, there is never a question about the reason we need to decarbonize the industrial sector. Our members are not climate deniers. They live and work in their communities, and they see and feel the impacts of climate change. Our members in the refining sector in the Gulf have surely experienced their share of superstorms over the years. The questions for them are about the unintended impacts of clean energy policies, and these unintended impacts would be layered on top of ongoing battles with unbalanced trade practices that affect almost all of our trade-exposed sectors. A robust domestic manufacturing sector supplying the clean energy transition is not just important to our members, but also to their communities. The average steelworker is paid about $85,000 a year plus benefits. Those wages ripple out into the community and help fund infrastructure projects, schools, and hospitals, not to mention the multiplier effect, as for every one job in the US steel industry alone, 7 more are created. So for our union, we have to strike a very delicate balance. It's clear that our economy is undergoing an energy transition, and it's clear that the industrial sector will also need to go through this transition. A key goal of clean energy policies has to be to help bring backbone industries like glass and steel, chemicals, and cement into the new economy. My testimony details some of the policies we view as necessary as we engage in this conversation, but some top lines are, first, workers have to be at the table. You can't develop worker-focused policy if workers have no input. So we very much appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Second, investments in clean energy manufacturing. It will take a suite of policies to ensure an even more efficient manufacturing sector. including things like a clean technology manufacturing and industrial bank, broader manufacturing R&D, grid modernization, investments in carbon capture utilization and sequestration, and direct air capture technologies. Third, make the products and technologies here. We have to harness American innovation into products and technologies to achieve the transition to a clean energy economy. There are so many examples of technologies like wind energy being innovated here, but widely deployed elsewhere. We have to do better. Fourth, Buy America.
Team for installation of hydrogen fueling systems, as well as expanding our manufacturing. Opportunity to discuss the benefits of clean hydrogen and decarbonizing the U.S. economy. The federal government has a critical role to play in success of this industry. And on behalf of our CEO, Andy Marsh, and all the employees of Plug Power, I look forward to working with the committee as you explore opportunities to accelerate development of clean hydrogen and fuel cell technologies across a wide spectrum of American industries and economic sectors. A hydrogen fuel cell generates power by combining hydrogen and oxygen to produce electricity without combustion, producing only water and heat as byproducts. This zero-emission alternative energy source can be used in a growing number of applications, including electric vehicles such as forklifts, delivery vans, and cars. Additionally, hydrogen fuel cells can produce enough energy to provide both primary and backup power for a variety of commercial and industrial and residential buildings. Finally, clean hydrogen can be used to decarbonize other transportation sectors like aviation and marine, as well as heavy industrial processes. In addition to decarbonizing entire sectors of the economy, it is estimated in 2020, the McKinsey report, the U.S. Roadmap to a U.S. Hydrogen Economy, that by 2030, the U.S. hydrogen economy can generate $140 billion of revenue and support 700,000 jobs across the hydrogen value chain. By 2050, this number has the potential to raise to $750 billion in revenue and a cumulative 3.4 million jobs. Achieving this vision will require collaboration between the federal government and the private sector to establish key economic incentives that drive innovation and investment. Unlocking the potential of clean hydrogen will require progress on three fronts: federal government support of key programs at the Department of Energy and other agencies throughout the government, favorable tax incentives enabling the scale-up of clean hydrogen production, and federal government investment for large-scale clean hydrogen production, scale-up of manufacturing of electrolyzers and fuel cells, establishing a nationwide refueling network for on- and off-road zero-emission vehicles, and building the infrastructure needed to transport clean hydrogen to markets. We are the leading national provider of comprehensive hydrogen and fuel cell turnkey solutions. The company's innovative technology is an example of the paradigm shift in the power, energy, and transportation industries to address climate change and energy security while striving to meet sustainability goals. We aim to build the first green hydrogen generation network across the U.S. and are working with multiple renewable energy companies across the country to provide clean energy to our green hydrogen production facilities. Last year, during the COVID pandemic, as an essential business, 30% of all retail food and groceries in the United States went through a distribution center powered by Plug Power hydrogen e-mobility systems. We are expanding our network and have created jobs nationwide. Last year, our company added 427 new jobs, a 49.7% increase from the previous year. And importantly, we did not eliminate any positions during this time. Today, we employ over 1,300 people across the country and have almost 200 new open positions that must be filled immediately. We also are honored to be a preferred employer for a 137-person veteran workforce. These green-collar jobs Plug Power provides specifically on our service team complement the training and the discipline our employees learned while in the U.S. military. Plug Power will be opening its Innovation Center this year in Rochester, New York. This will mark a significant expansion based on need and demand in the production and manufacturing capabilities for fuel cells and electrolyzers. Plug Power will invest $125 million in the local economy, creating 375 new jobs and bringing material and component suppliers to the region. We are thankful to Congress for its past support for clean hydrogen, including maintaining robust appropriations for the DOE's Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technology Program in recent years. In particular, funding through the annual Appropriations and American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, Plug Power developed hydrogen and fuel cell products for concept and commercialization. Finally, although it is not in the jurisdiction of this committee, other policies will be essential to complement the work of DOE to achieve full economic and environmental potential of the clean hydrogen industry. Toward that end, we hope Congress will consider establishing new clean hydrogen tax incentives for production and investments in nationwide hydrogen infrastructure. Again, I want to thank the members of the committee for allowing me to testify on behalf of Plug Power on the ways that which the federal government may assist in the acceleration of the use of clean hydrogen to decarbonize the American economy and create millions of new domestic jobs in the process. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Curtis. Dr. Kerfis, please begin.
In front of you today. My name is, there you go. We unmuted, of course. That's a typical goof there in terms of WebEx. Thanks again, Chairwoman Kaptur and Ranking Member Simpson for the invitation to participate here. My name is Tom Kerfis. As was stated before, I am the Chief Manufacturing Officer for U.S. Department of Energy, Oak Ridge National Laboratory. My formal training is engineering and computer science, but I've got manufacturing in my blood. I grew up in a small machine shop in the Chicago area. And what I'm here to tell you today is really what Department of Energy's national laboratories are doing to develop, demonstrate, and deploy the latest and greatest scientific and technical capabilities for advanced manufacturing here in the United States, not just for the big players, but for all the small and medium-sized enterprises. It's called democratizing advanced manufacturing, getting out there. I don't think it's a big secret in terms of how important manufacturing is. 12 million jobs. 2018, $2.3 trillion in terms of economic activity, 11.5% of the gross domestic product. Every dollar you spend in manufacturing, 274 is added to the economy. And really what we're doing here at Oak Ridge National Laboratory is to bring over 5,500 scientists and engineers together in more than 100 disciplines to move advanced manufacturing forward. We're doing this via, one of the areas is our manufacturing demonstration facility. The DOE's only R&D facility of its kind, and it basically provides our industry partners with infrastructure tools and in particular expertise to move forward new technologies in advanced manufacturing. We've worked with over 200 industry collaborators, 54 universities, and we engage our sister laboratories, 10 other laboratories we work with. Our mantra is innovating faster than the competition can copy. Our vision is rapid innovation and ensuring U.S. dominance in advanced manufacturing. And our mission is to identify, scale up, and integrate critical technologies for new and emerging advanced manufacturing sectors. We do this with a hub and spoke model. We partner with industry, university partners, and other national labs throughout the country. Actually, University of Toledo is one of them. We just had a big workshop in terms of using 3D printing, metal 3D printing, to generate molds for the automotive sector. Rather than waiting for a year or two for those molds to come into China, we should be able to produce those here locally so that we could turn around new car designs within just a matter of months. And also looking at some of the, some of the material models. So instead of metal, why not carbon fiber technology? So we have an entire pilot plant here that produces 25 tons per year in a roll-to-roll process. So it comes off and it rolls up on a roll. We actually worked with Cummins and we provided a significant support. Cummins is now producing 1 million N95 masks a day based on the technology developed over here. And not only are they producing masks, but they've got great jobs as well. And so the idea is really, how do we move this technology forward? By the way, you see behind me in my virtual background, well, this is just about 50 meters away, it's our Medusa system. These 3 robots are putting down metal in a large-scale metal 3D printer that we could use to make these dies for the automotive sectors, things that are stamping out car doors and so forth. So the bottom line is that really together with our university and industry partners and the other national laboratories, we're developing and demonstrating advanced capabilities. Again, carbon fiber technology, this is what you see on lightweighting vehicles. But if you take a look at the large-scale wind turbines, those blades are carbon fiber. The same roll-to-roll technology we're using to move battery technology forward, which is critical for clean energy. Where are we going to store all that solar energy? Speaking of solar energy, again, roll-to-roll, we're producing, when you do that, you use roll-to-roll technology for solar panels and solar cells. So manufacturing is here. We're working together with our industry partner. What we do for them is we take a look at the next generation technology, we de-risk it, we help them move it into their production operations. So the bottom line is, together with our university and industry strategic partners and the other national laboratories, we will innovate faster than the competition can copy. We're developing, demonstrating, and deploying advanced technology that will keep the U.S. manufacturing sector at the forefront of innovation and spur the creation of highly compensated jobs. By leveraging the assets of the National Lab System through a variety of agreements, private industry can de-risk their innovation and accelerate commercialization. We look forward to continuing our scientific and engineering pursuits in the form of clean, efficient, and sustainable manufacturing for the nation's prosperity and security. Anytime you want to come out and take a look at some of our facilities, let me know. You are most welcome, and it'll be looking at something like you were in a Star Wars movie, because you can see right behind me there, my kids tell me I look like Dr. Octopus with those robots coming out of me, but it is unbelievably high tech, and it really is next generation technology. Thanks very much for your opportunity to testify today in front of this esteemed committee, and I welcome your questions on this important topic.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Kerfis, and what an outstanding panel this has been, and we've had outstanding turnout of members as well today. So your message is falling on very fertile ground. We're going to begin questions. We've been interrupted by votes, and some members may have to go vote and come back. I will ask Congresswoman Kirkpatrick to replace me when I'm forced to leave just to make the vote. But I will start questions with Dr. Choate. I would like to ask him to please expand on your point that new technology can be used to create a new financing mechanism for city, water, and sewer authorities. That was a very interesting statement in your presentation. And then secondly, how can we confront the regional inequality issue as we address the need to give a reboot to manufacturing in our country?
Thank you, Representative Capter. Onto the question of financing, what happens in this new technology that exists out at DC Water is it makes massive fuel savings. The energy is pulled out of the wastewater that is flowing through there. And as such, DC Water is saving about $100,000 a year just on fuel savings. It's saving probably another 10 or 12,000 on not having to produce water for their air conditioning. They save about 1.5 million gallons of water per year as such. Now, imagine, for example, that that building were put into a hot water loop with buildings around it. Those savings could increase substantially, almost proportionately. Those savings themselves could then be capitalized on. They could, for example, be used to create a sinking fund. They could be used to issue bonds. As such, the savings from a business perspective are substantial. The cost of the device that was put in is about $300,000. The installation is about $600,000. This is a system, if it's put into a series, can save and can be paid off in 2 to 3 years. You take that on a machine that's designed to last for 45 years, you put it in a city such as Washington or Toledo or Cleveland or Denver, and you'll generate millions of dollars of revenue. Now, one of the thoughts that comes to my mind on doing that is to perhaps consider changing the federal formulas, and in a way that doesn't seem obvious. What if we had a 6% federal match and a 94% local match, but the local match is helped by the federal government to receive private monies? In other words, the federal government could create a regional infrastructure bank, and that bank would back the bonds with that assured set of revenues dedicated through a sinking fund. This could almost be a AAA bond, low interest money, as it could pay off very quickly. Those revenues then could be used for repair, replacement, rehabilitation, and to further expand the system. The water system itself becomes a major source of revenues that the city can use. As to the regional question, The problems that were identified, for example, in your chart of regional income and in the chart that I put up on regional distress are widespread, but they're also heavily concentrated. They're concentrated in the Great Lakes, they're concentrated in the Mississippi Valley, they're concentrated in the Crescent along the southern border and parts of the northwestern United States. They require special attention. The model for dealing with this is the Tennessee Valley Authority. Here is an independent authority that has supplemental funds. It has wide authority to invest in infrastructure, economic development, and more importantly, it can deal with problems across the region. Many of the problems are not simply isolated to a state or a community, but are truly regional in nature. This will allow those states working together with the federal government to lay out long-term plans, sustain long-term efforts, and make the case for a substantial increase of funds to deal with what is truly a national problem that they cannot solve upon their own.
Thank you so very much. Just this morning, I got off a telephone call relative to the automotive industry that is a regionally troubling issue in the Great Lakes. So thank you for recognizing that our coast exists. I truly appreciate it. And it's heavy industry. So I wanted to move to our ranking member, Mr. Simpson, and for questions. And then we will have a second round as members rotate. And when I'm forced to leave, to go vote, I will be back and I will ask Congresswoman Kirkpatrick if she could take the gavel at that point. Thank you, Dr. Choate.
Thank you, Chairwoman Capter. First, Mr. Cortez, let me ask you, at the Idaho National Laboratory, the INL, we are leading a tri-lab effort on integrated energy systems to harness the process heat from nuclear plants and turn it into hydrogen. The research at the INL has centered on a high temperature electrolysis that has the potential to deeply decarbonize steelmaking and other refractory processes. Do you agree that an abundant and inexpensive hydrogen produced from non-carbon energy sources such as nuclear can make the U.S. manufacturing of these building materials more environmentally sustainable?
Yeah, absolutely. So Plug Power recently, we made 2 acquisitions last year. One of them was actually an electrolyzer company that's based in Boston, Massachusetts. And as we looked at our green hydrogen initiative and our strategy for the future, we are definitely focused on all energies that are considered renewable, including nuclear. So we're looking at wind, solar, hydro, nuclear, and how can we take advantage of those existing technologies and those existing energy sources that are renewable to help us grow and expand our capacity in terms of our green hydrogen. So the network that we're building out, that we want to build out, is a green hydrogen network. It will be based on renewables and it will be based on electrolysis. And we definitely are considering nuclear power as well as other renewable sources. Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Dr. Kerfus, a catalyst is a material that speeds up and directs chemical reactions. I know that you already know that. And catalysts are the backbone of chemical manufacturing. 90% of all chemical production relies on a catalyst. We need them to make everything from diapers to diesels. Over the past several years, at this committee's direction, DOE has provided for research of dynamic catalyst science with data analytics. These investments have provided the tools that researchers need to study how chemical reactions unfold on real catalysts, allowing for a pivot from catalyst trial and error to science-based design for advanced catalyst materials. This breakthrough will allow for the use of more effective catalysts and cut the energy use and carbon intensity of chemical manufacturing processes. What benefits do you believe radically new lower carbon chemical manufacturing processes designed for distributed dynamic operations will have on the manufacturing sector at large and the U.S. competitiveness?
Yeah, so that is a great question, Congressman Simpson, and I believe that this is so. First of all, it's a perfect area for us to be in because a lot of these catalysts and so forth are very important in terms of reducing our energy consumption. So again, you reduce energy consumption, you make our processes much more competitive and so forth. It also allows us to really scale up more green capabilities. As we take a look at really being able to leverage our production operations, and really you're talking chemical sector, you're talking petrochemical and so forth. It's a huge amount of energy consumption. So if we could use these catalysts and move these catalysts forward, and again, to lower the energy requirements for consumption, not only is it great in terms of reducing carbon output and consumption or production in our processes, but it also allows us to use lower amounts of energy. Combination of these two, again, just makes us more energy efficient. Energy efficient makes us much more capable in terms of our competitiveness. The other thing I really want to point out is that we can reduce. We all see that energy costs do fluctuate around. Can't even fluctuate around. The recent situation in Texas demonstrated you could have some significant fluctuations. If we can reduce that consumption of energy, then you can actually make our manufacturing operations more robust to flexible pricing and so forth. So you can actually have reduced risks in that. So you reduce the risk for carbon emissions, you reduce your risk for energy fluctuation and cost fluctuation, and pretty much guarantee a better profit margin. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And let me ask you one more question before I have to go vote. This subcommittee previously has heard many anecdotes suggesting it is difficult for private companies to engage partnerships with the national laboratories. Your testimony, however, discusses the many partnerships that Oak Ridge National Lab, one of our great national laboratories, especially through the manufacturing and demonstration facilities. Could you please discuss any challenges to establishing these partnerships? And do you have any suggestions on how we can let more companies and innovators know about the capabilities available at our labs to help them with their manufacturing questions?
Yes. So first of all, I think the biggest challenge is really people are concerned about intellectual property and who owns it and so forth. The bottom line there is we have really streamlined the process. We've put out the best possible deal. We're not interested, look, we're not interested in making money off of this. We're interested in having U.S. companies make money off of it, strengthening our national security. So I think that that's a key thing in terms of just streamlining the process. And in terms of what we might do to have people come out, look, we have several thousand visitors coming through our facility. So we're actually now, I mean, one of the pluses, if you will, for the current virus is we do have virtual tours that are going on and so forth. Again, we want to make sure that these are U.S. type companies going through, that we do have these kind of operations. But people just come through. So I would say let's make sure that we get the word out. And you mentioned a couple of other laboratories. We work closely with those laboratories. So in fact, we're making plugs for, you mentioned Idaho over in the cybersecurity area. We're working together in all these different areas to make sure that our industry partners really see it. But it is that engagement, the virtual tours, and also just the engagement in the industry. But please send them down to us. We are, as soon as we can open our doors, come on down. We're really willing to have people come through, and you're welcome.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that, and thank you for the work you do at Oak Ridge. It is truly one of our great national laboratories. Yield back.
Go. And say, introduce Chairman.
I'm taking over for the chairwoman while she goes to vote. I'm Representative Ann Kirkpatrick, and at this time, I would like to recognize Chairwoman DeLauro.
Thank you very, very much, Ann. And I would just take this opportunity to say to you that I'm going to miss you, my friend, going to miss you, and just God love you. You're the best. And say hello to your children for me as well. Have deep, wonderful memories of being with them in New Haven. So thanks so much. Thank you. My question is for Ms. Brown. I think we all share the desire to create good paying American manufacturing jobs, and millions of jobs can be created by a clean energy revolution. And again, we believe the U.S. has the opportunity to reassert itself as a manufacturing powerhouse for renewable energy technologies. I'm concerned about American-led innovations moving offshore for scaled-up manufacturing. The technologies will require a highly skilled workforce that we need to prepare for. So I'm interested in hearing more about what measures you think the subcommittee can take to ensure that American workers are in a strong position in this regard. What opportunities exist for educational and workforce training for your membership? What's the best way to incentivize this expansion?
Thank you so much for the question, Chairwoman DeLauro, and it's so great to see you. So I think for us, it's layered. We are not a building trades union, and so we don't offer the traditional training halls that building trades unions do. However, a lot of our employers, our members' employers, do offer, on the job trainings for, upskilling and learning additional skills at their facilities. So that's one piece of it, and making sure that those partnerships can be created with those employers and local community colleges, for an example. The former ArcelorMittal Steel, which is now Cleveland Cliffs, ran the Steelworkers for the Future program. And it was a program that allowed, steelworkers to be trained up. And after they were trained up, they were able to get an associate's degree and they were placed at an Arcelor facility. That's a great program, and it's a model that can be replicated across the manufacturing sector. But I think the other piece of it goes to what you said about these technologies being developed here and then going elsewhere. I think a big thing that we can do rests a lot in what's happening at our national labs. Innovating, breeding the technologies here, making sure that there's buy-in from the domestic producers of these technologies, and therefore making sure that there's buy-in from domestic manufacturers. So somehow creating a link between what's happening at the labs, what's happening with the producers of these technologies, and the needs of domestic manufacturers. Because in many cases, and this has been discussed, small and medium-sized manufacturers in particular know that they need help decarbonizing, but they don't know what's available for them to do that. They don't know what's happening at the national labs. They don't know the types of technologies that are being discussed. So I think creating that link between the labs, the producers of the technology, and the manufacturers would be really, really key in making sure that there's actually a market for the use of those technologies here.
So we can deal with the incentivizing the labs and linking up the producers and the manufacturers, and then your emphasis on looking at community colleges and industry so that they can partner in terms of apprenticeship programs, intern programs, those kinds of efforts to develop, workforce. Thank you.
right.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Chairwoman.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And I have about a minute, a little more left. So let me ask Dr. Kerfis, and I'll just truncate any introduction to this. Look, we're trying to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions. We're trying to make a transition to clean energy, critical in reaching the goal. You highlighted ORNL's work, wind turbines, carbon capture, battery storage, low emissions. Given that we need to move quickly in terms of a transition, need where additional resources? What incentives are necessary for greater industry investment in clean energy manufacturing, clean energy transition?
But the bottom line, thanks again, Will, for unmuting me. The bottom line here is that I think the incentives are really, in many cases, in place. We really need to get that carbon out, but the cost of energy continues to go up, and so the idea is really let's use less energy, let's make use of the carbon. Really, what we're working towards is making it cost effective to do this. And so how do we move this forward? And I agree with actually what Ms. Brown just said. And the bottom line is really making sure that what we need to incentivize is to have the workforce that can use the technology. It really increases your profit margins, and so to us, it's really about how do we make it more profitable. And the bottom line is the green option is very much profitable, and it also really de-risks things. So these are the types of things that we look at, but we've got to get that right workforce base in there to help us move forward. And I want to point out, when we talk about universities and colleges, it is about next generation, but it's also about current generation. That current generation workforce can easily be retooled. You take your smartphone, you go check the weather, you're accessing constellations of NOAA satellites, supercomputing models, and a whole bit to tell you whether to take an umbrella out or not. People are comfortable with it. We can do the same thing in manufacturing.
Here, here. Okay. Thank you. I know I ran out of time, and thank you, Madam Chair. And I yield back. I've got to tell Congresswoman Kaptur and our ranking member, I love the visuals in the background here. Done a great job with the creatively with the visuals. Thank you. And I yield back.
Thank you, Rosa. I appreciate your thoughts and your perspective. I'd now like to recognize Mr. Fleischman for his comments and questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you all know, ORNL has a tremendous track record of facilitating the transition of technologies out of a laboratory setting and into the economy. Many companies, universities, and research institutes have cooperative agreements with ORNL and other national labs in the manufacturing science spaces. How do we engage our smaller companies, mom and pop shops that make up the backbone of the U.S. manufacturing ecosystem? Dr. Kerfis.
Well, thank you, Congressman Fleischman. And this is a great question because really this is like 85% of our manufacturing operations. It's so critical to the middle class. Part of the engagement, of course, is working through resources like the Manufacturing Extension Partnership out of Commerce, Department of Commerce, NIST. Other elements are really engaging, and I think you heard it, from Ms. Brown, really engaging on the educational side to make sure that these companies know what technology is there. Look, you go to them, they buy a piece of equipment, it's state of the art. They're not buying a 20-year-old piece of equipment, it's state of the art. What they need to know is they need to know how to use it, how to connect it up in a secure fashion. Cymani, our cybersecurity institute that Oak Ridge is a big part of, Sandia is in there, Idaho is in there. We're showing them how to really connect it up and not worry about a lot of the security issues because they're prepared for it. So it is an issue of engaging them. The hub and spoke model is perfect. And really, as we engage, and larger companies do get it. As we engage the larger companies, they know their supply chain needs to be brought along as well. So I think a lot of what's happening, there is a realization that it's not just the big people are putting together the cars or the aircraft. It's everybody's making all the way down to the nuts and bolts. They're important. And that realization and understanding and making sure that they can move forward with everybody else is critical. So again, universities, hub and spoke type of models, excellent way to operate. Thank you.
Thank you. A follow-up, and I'll ask for a quick response because I have a question for Dr. Cortez, but this is for you again, Dr. Kurz.
Sure.
This morning, another subcommittee on which I serve as ranking member, the Homeland Security Subcommittee, held a hearing with two former DHS secretaries, one Republican and one Democratic. We discussed a myriad of challenges, threats, and issues, but cybersecurity, understandable, came up numerous times. Are there any specific cybersecurity concerns related to manufacturing that are being addressed by your operations?
Yes, so I would say there are really a couple of large ones. One is on just the personnel side. Again, getting back to workforce development. Most of our cybersecurity problems really come from human errors and so forth, or people not paying attention or not following right protocols. So there's a lot of training going on that we're working on. The other one is really just to put together the right type of hardware and software to defend against cyber breaches and so forth. And what I'll tell you is it's not about building a wall. It's really it's just like I said before, innovating faster than the competition could copy. We've got to stay ahead of them in terms of technology and knowing how it's going on, knowing what to look for, knowing how to react very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Cortez, I understand there'll be a renewed focus on the Department of Energy's loan programs to support the deployment of renewable and clean energy. How could a program like DOE's Title 17 loan guarantee program help the hydrogen industry and companies like Plug Power?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. The Title 17 loan program has definitely demonstrated its ability to support innovative technologies being deployed for the first time at a commercial scale. So if you look at the program's existing portfolio, we can see that it's been an instrumental role and played in help launching the utility scale solar industry a decade ago. And we're very hopeful that the enthusiasm from Secretary Granholm's Title 17 and the experience brings together the role of the Executive Director of DOE's Loan Program Office. There will again be tremendous opportunity to help support new technologies and industries, particularly like green hydrogen and fuel cells that are necessary to achieve near zero emissions by 2050. But these programs have been instrumental, and we're looking forward to the opportunity to continue to take advantage and use those as we move forward to build additional opportunities within the sector from a manufacturing standpoint, but also to create more additional jobs.
Thank you. My time is growing near. As a longtime supporter, Dr. Cortez, of hydrogen and fuel cells, I'm pleased to see the wide range of activities at the DOE around hydrogen energy and fuel cell technologies across various offices. What should DOE do to ensure that there is a coordination and effort between these programs to ensure that we are maximizing our investments and preventing duplication of effort, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. So Plug Power and the industry, are very pleased and appreciate the R&D and the other support for hydrogen energy and fuel cell technologies within the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Technology Office, as well as within the Office of Fossil Energy. As new sectors emerge to utilize hydrogen to decarbonize the industrial processes and operations, it's even more important, we feel, for inter and intra-agency coordination with the DOE and other federal agencies, as well as with industry, to ensure that these investments truly have the maximum impact in moving the industry and all the applications forward. So that better tightly coupled communication and work together between the other offices, we think can really bear a tremendous amount of fruit as the potential for hydrogen within other sectors becomes readily available.
Thank you, sir. I thank all the witnesses and I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fleischman. I appreciate your perspective, especially because I think Oak Ridge is in your district, isn't it? Yes, I thought so.
That's correct.
I don't see Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz is on, so I'm going to go call on myself for questions. My home state of Arizona is the second fastest growing state in the country, with massive population growth and development in some parts of the state. At the same time, Arizona is really on the front line of climate change. Temperatures are rising every year, and we're seeing more extreme flooding, and our wildfires are getting more and more severe. I talk to manufacturers in Arizona who tell me that it's too expensive to stay in Arizona when they could just move their operations to Mexico just a few miles away. This can't continue. We have to ensure that our workforce has access to good paying union jobs here in the United States. And we must prioritize clean energy solutions at the same time. So my question is, and this is for everyone on the panel, how can this subcommittee best prioritize underserved communities, job training, and expanding the capabilities of the American workforce as we look to modernize our energy infrastructure and workforce?
Congresswoman Kirkpatrick, this is Roxanne Brown. I think a key way to do that is to build equities into the policies that the subcommittee will be advancing. And one of those equities is, I mentioned in my testimony, Buy America. If there is a preference placed on the products that American workers, in many cases union workers, are making across the spectrum. I mentioned our members are in all of commodity-based industries, from steel to glass to aluminum, cement, mining. If we are placing a preference on those products that are being made by American workers domestically, and we're saying that for all of our systems, for infrastructure, for these clean technology systems, wherever taxpayer dollars are used, there should be a preference placed across the board on domestically produced products. I think that's one piece of it. The second piece of it is also something that's in my testimony, Buy Clean, which would be layered on top of Buy America. That's another equity that can be built in for domestic industry. US manufacturers are really the most efficient in the world, and so would benefit from a policy that places a preference on goods made in the cleanest, most efficient ways, again, in many cases by union workers. So I think, building those types of equities into the policies that are generated are key ways of ensuring that, there are investments being made. They lead to good business decisions, I think, would be really key.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Thank you very much. Anybody else on the panel like to comment on that?
Yes, I would. I'll just add very quickly. This is Dr. Purvis. Ms. Brown couldn't be more correct. And let me tell you, the other thing that I look at is I want to make sure that they're mentioned that, oh, well, we're going to pay more for having it made in America. So moving this technology forward, really leveraging the technology, having the well-trained workforce makes us much more efficient, as she has correctly said. And what a lot of companies are starting to find is that you can build things in the United States of America. You can make money and you can actually do better than building them anywhere else in the world. So the bottom line is we are competitive and we need to drive that across. And by the way, this is not just me blowing smoke here. It really is. We see a lot of our large industry partners shifting over here. I'll just give you an example. BMW's largest production facility, South Carolina. So, I mean, this is just one of the things that we should be looking at. So it's not a pipe dream. It's not a charity and so forth. It's a reality and it makes business sense.
Congresswoman, I'm Pat Choate. May I make a couple of comments?
Sure. Please.
I live in Tucson, and I'm very pleased that you represent me and my family, and we were disappointed to learn that you'll be retiring. Several things can be done. The first thing is we need to create a national capital budget for our infrastructure. We need to lay out a long-term plan specifically of what we're going to do. Secondly, we should buy the materials and the equipment from American companies or even foreign companies, but are located in the U.S. and that have a domestic content. There are other things that we can get into, but we need some very specific agendas.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like now to recognize Mr. Fleischman Newhouse, for any questions he might have. Mr. Newhouse.
Thank you very much, Acting Chair Kirkpatrick. And let me just say, I too am disappointed to hear about your retirement plan. So look forward to continuing working with you in this term.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. This is an important topic. I appreciate the hosting of this hearing on the domestic manufacturing for our clean energy future. And if I could just humbly but proudly say that I am a champion for clean energy. My district in Central Washington State, if you didn't know, we're at the forefront of leading our nation's clean energy solutions. We're a leader in both clean energy production and innovation. And I believe our region should serve as an example for this committee, but also for the country, of the importance of a diversified energy mix and how a holistic approach to energy production can provide reliable energy to millions while supporting thousands of well-paying jobs. So I'm glad to see a representative for the United Steelworkers with us today. Thank you. As we discuss domestic manufacturing jobs in America's energy sector. From our world-class hydroelectric system to the only nuclear generating station in more than a dozen states, to hosting the largest solar and wind farms in the state of Washington, which are only made possible due to our hydro and our nuclear baseload systems. We love our clean energy in Washington state, and we love our clean energy jobs, and I really am very proud of the example we set. What I'm not proud of, though, if I may, Madam Chair, is this administration recklessly and heartlessly tearing away thousands of American jobs in the middle of a global pandemic. What I'm not proud of is President Biden, on his first day in office, unilaterally signing away thousands of well-paying jobs by halting construction of the Keystone XL pipeline with a flick of a pen. What I'm not proud of is this administration leaving local communities in the West in limbo as they try to manage the dire implications of the moratorium on federal oil and gas leasing on their state, local, and education budgets. Madam Chair, these unilateral approaches by President Biden and his administration are simply, in my view, unconscionable in the face of a global pandemic that, as we all know, has wreaked havoc on rural communities in the West and across the country. I simply refuse to lend any credence to the notion that the greatest country on the planet cannot both champion clean energy innovation, which we do, and climate solutions, which we do, while recognizing the continued need for traditional energy resources and ensuring American workers in these sectors are not having their livelihoods ripped away from them with the flick of a pen. But that's exactly what President Biden has done. It's heartless, it's unconscionable, and I believe it's absolutely wrong. Ms. Brown, again, welcome. Your brothers and sisters at the North America's Building Trades Union recently released a comprehensive report assessing job quality in the energy sector. The results of the study found quality job opportunities in the oil and natural gas construction sector, and both union and non-union energy construction workers report that oil and natural gas jobs are better overall careers for them. If I may quote Sean McGarvey, the president of the Building Trades Union, quote, "The findings outlined in these reports demonstrate that today's oil and natural gas jobs are better for energy construction workers across the country in both the short and the long term. The research confirms what our members tell us. The career opportunities for renewables are nowhere near what they are in gas and oil, and domestic energy workers highly value the safety, reliable duration, and compensation of oil and gas construction jobs," end quote. Madam Chair, I ask that this report be entered into the record. So my question for you, Ms. Brown, with the short time we have remaining, with millions of Americans unemployed because of the impacts of COVID-19 and the lockdowns on our economy, is it a smart idea to unilaterally eliminate existing jobs simply because they happen to be in an industry that many of my Democrat friends find unfashionable? Ms. Brown?
Congressman Newhouse, I really appreciate that question. Two things I would say. Number one, there was an opportunity for the Keystone XL pipeline project to actually have significant jobs benefits across the country, both in the building and construction trades and also on the manufacturing side where our union lives. And unfortunately, it was extremely lacking on the use of domestically produced steel pipe. They chose to source pipe from India. And so it was questionable in terms of the overall jobs impact that project would have had. But the second piece of your question, it's a very little known fact, I think, about our union, is we represent more than 30,000 men and women in the domestic refining sector. And the crux of your question, I appreciate, because this is why it's difficult for labor. Our members in the refining sector make on average, $120,000 a year. And it is we can't tell them that they then should look to forget about their jobs and look to jobs installing solar panels, right? That would pay them, maybe $20 an hour. So to your point, we are focused on making sure that the jobs that do exist for our members are able to exist for the long term. And that's why for us, for our members in the refining sector, we're looking at carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration technology. We want to make sure that that technology is deployable at scale so that those existing jobs at those existing facilities can be brought into the future. And that is our focus. But you pinpoint a very complicated issue that remains within the labor community.
Well, I appreciate that. I have to say, though, that there certainly were jobs lost due to that one decision. 8,000 to 10,000 jobs immediately lost. The things that you talk about are great goals. I don't argue that, but we've got to get to the future. We just can't, wiggle our nose or blink our eyes and we're there. There has to be an opportunity for people to continue to make a living in the meantime. And these jobs are being ripped away now. And that's not whether pandemic or not, that's not a good thing. And so I appreciate your response. But I've been to some of these small communities in the areas where they are directly impacted by these decisions. And I wish I could bring those folks here so that you and the rest of the committee could see their faces, hear their stories. And when I use those words I used, it's not just some rhetoric. These are things I've witnessed myself, seen in people's eyes the struggles that they are having. And I just wanted to point out the fact that these have consequences. These decisions have hard consequences for working men and women across this country. And I appreciate your answer. And Madam Chair, I know my time has long expired, but thank you very much for helping answer that question.
Without objection,
Yep.
without objection, the report is entered into the record.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for your kind words. So I would like now to recognize my neighbor from Nevada, Representative Susie Lee.
Thank you. I want to thank the chairwoman, Captor, and ranking member for having this important hearing today. And thank you, Congresswoman Kirkpatrick, for filling in. You know, I think that boosting the manufacturing is going to be crucial to helping fuel an economic recovery for working families. And I've been pleased to see that the Biden administration is rolling out policies to support manufacturing growth in the United States. But we must also support the expansion of clean energy generation capacity, ensuring that we are on the forefront of clean energy export markets for the future. And I'm really proud that my home state of Nevada is one of 7 states to have committed to 100% clean energy. And this progress has been achieved with the leadership and partnership of the private sector. With companies such as Switch, which is a technology company focused on the design and operation of data center. Switch is now using 100% renewable energy for all of its operations. We've gotten great results in Nevada with our state seeing an increase of 66.6% in the use of clean energy over the past decade, while the national average has been just a 20% increase. There's still plenty of work to be done on a national level, and I'm looking forward to working in a bipartisan manner on this subcommittee to find some real solutions to these issues. Dr. Choate, I wanted to ask you, in your testimony, you talked about the heating and cooling making up the majority of energy use in the building sector. As you stated that since 2010, space cooling is the fastest growing use of energy in buildings, growing by 8% a year. As I'm sure you can imagine, coming from a state representing the Las Vegas area, this problem is especially concerning because we're in a hotter state, and despite being a leader in renewable energy, Nevada's electricity consumption often exceeds our in-state generation, and additional electricity supplies are often brought in to Nevada over high voltage transmission lines from other states. Can you speak to challenges that states are facing in keeping up with the energy demands while incorporating a shift towards renewable energy within the overall grid?
Yes, ma'am, I can. Basically, I live in Tucson. We've experienced the same problems of energy demand. What we now see is a real breakthrough in technology in heat transfer, pulling heat from sewer. There's an inventor and company in Germany. There's one in Canada. What is happening in parts of Europe, what is happening in parts of Canada, is you're having a major shift where buildings are adopting this new technology and are pulling their heat from the sewer systems. Vancouver is under a process to put roughly 20 million square feet of heating and cooling to drive it off of sewer heat. Washington, D.C. is the only city in the country that has representations of the two technologies, one from Germany, it's at the American Geophysical building at 2000 Rhode Island, I think, and then the DC water system. If we make the shift in cities such as Las Vegas and Reno and Tucson and Phoenix to these types of systems, first of all, we can cut the cost of heating and cooling in old buildings by up to as much as 70%. And in new buildings that are super energy efficient, such as DC water, we can cut it up to 30%. And we can do that. When we do that, there will be zero emissions from our heating and cooling. This is a wonderful opportunity. I'm convinced this technology is going to be adapted worldwide. There will need to be tens of thousands of units manufactured. These are the kinds of jobs that the steel workers do. I have worked with the steel workers over many years. These are the kinds of jobs that of installation that our existing trades can do. We can do this very quickly. The very fact that most of the infrastructure is in place. We have the sewer lines, we have the water lines. All we need is that connection of this device to pull it out. We can take the existing heating and cooling equipment in the building and modify it, leaving the existing boilers as backup. This is a great new potential that this technology offers to the country.
Thank you. It sounds very exciting. Love to bring you out to Las Vegas and introduce you to some of our big hotels and see if we can lead the way.
May I say something?
Yeah.
The DC water system is a third of a mile from the Capitol. I'm sure they would be delighted to show you this system in operation so you can see what's really possible for Las Vegas and other parts of the country.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm over my time and I yield. Thanks.
Thank you, Congresswoman Lee. We're going to do a special committee meeting up there. I don't know how we're going to do it, but I think our membership would be astounded to see what's going on. And you really see the future. That's for sure. I talked to Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton about that. And Congresswoman Kirkpatrick, thank you for subbing. I really do appreciate your efforts. Congressman Reschenthaler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. You know, critical minerals are necessary to manufacture everything from cell phones to weapon systems. Additionally, some on the left fail to recognize this, but critical minerals are also needed to build things like Tesla batteries and even wind turbines. And despite having a $6.2 trillion value in our domestic critical mineral reserves, we as the United States still rely on China for roughly 80% of our rare earth elements. What makes this even worse is that the Department of the Interior and DoD listed 35 minerals as critical. China has 23, has a leading edge on 23 of the 35 of those minerals. So basically, 23 out of 35 critical minerals we need are controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. At the same time, not only is that a threat to us in terms of national security, it's also a threat to the global environment because China emits more greenhouse gases than the United States, Japan, and the European Union combined. So given our reliance on Chinese minerals, given the fact that China has a horrible record of being good stewards of the environment, we need to recognize that any green manufacturing policies that we implement in the United States will simply be undercut by China's abysmal standards on the environment. So if we're serious about reducing manufacturing impact on the environment, we have to come to the reality that we've got to mine critical minerals here in the United States. And remember that thanks to American innovation, the United States currently leads the world in CO2 emission reduction. In fact, prior to COVID, we were the only nation, even though we had gotten out of the tree, we were the only nation in the Paris Climate Accord that actually did anything to reduce CO2 emissions. So we can and we should deploy American ingenuity to take advantage of our domestic supply chain of critical minerals to not only strengthen our industrial base, improve our national security, but also to make sure that we're good stewards of the global environment. So with that said, Dr. Kerfess, in your testimony, you noted that Oak Ridge National Laboratory's work on green manufacturing and advanced battery areas rely heavily on these critical minerals. Do you have a recommendation for how this subcommittee can facilitate solutions to reduce our nation's reliance on China and their stranglehold on critical minerals, in particular, how Congress can help cultivate our own domestic supply chain?
Yes, Congressman, excellent question. And I really think that there are a couple of different approaches here. One certainly is to say, how do we mine these critical minerals? A good chunk of them are available here in the U.S., but it actually has not been very cost effective due to due to technology limitations and so forth. So one of the things is really taking a look at next generation technologies to allow us to mine these and then subsequently really process them it actually gives us a very good opportunity to move forward. That's one approach to this. Still, I think that you do have these rare earth minerals and so forth that are difficult to mine and they are hard to process and so forth. The other one is really coming up with new designs. We're working very closely with a number of different partners, both on the battery side as well as, for example, electric motor side, where we can eliminate the use of these materials in the product. And I think if you do that, all of a sudden you have a tremendous advantage over our international competition, because now we can produce those here in the U.S. We can market those abroad. And number one is we're no longer relying on the foreign supply, for example, from China. And number two, we're also meeting a lot of the standards that we're seeing other nations are also putting forward. So it's going to allow us to mine things and process things using the latest technology. But number two is figure out how we substitute if we don't make use of those types of materials. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you. And Ms. Brown, in your testimony, you said, and I quote, "We must invest in, expand, and refocus existing DOE energy and manufacturing loan programs to establish strength, domestic clean technology manufacturing and supply chains." Do you believe that USW believes that critical minerals should, and the supply chain of critical minerals should be included in these efforts?
Absolutely. I'll keep it very short and just say absolutely. And in fact, in 2019, we held a summit on sustainable mining with our union, a handful of environmental organizations, and a large global miner, Rio Tinto, to talk exactly about this. And we've been heavily engaged in this work since then because we need critical materials, as you pointed out. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Ms. Brown. I appreciate it. And thanks, Dr. Kerfis. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back and thank you.
Thank you, very good. And I think it'd be useful to submit those, the names of those minerals and substances to the record, Congressman. And let's get DOE to respond a little more thoroughly, okay? You with me on that?
Hey, yes, Madam Chair, I'll get you those for the record. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you. Thank you so very much. I think Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz is next.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Brown, I want to thank you for raising the often overlooked issue of carbon leakage. I really believe in many cases offshoring emissions has gone hand in hand with the offshoring of manufacturing jobs to countries with weaker labor standards. So we need to not only create manufacturing jobs here in America, but we also need to make sure that they're clean manufacturing jobs that we create here in America. And I know that's possible. So if you or anyone else on the panel can chime in as well, can you talk about this relationship and how can we stop carbon intensive activities from being offshored rather than actually mitigated?
I think it really boils down to investment. And I think, I'm heartened to be a part of this panel because I think to a person, the two key themes are investment and innovation. And, I think if we focus all of our collective efforts in those two places, then that will, without question, lead to the competitiveness of domestic industry so that it could, prevent that leakage to other nations. But this is where it is critical to have the programs that DOE operates in terms of low-cost loans and grants and other funding mechanisms to make it affordable for domestic industry, again, especially small and medium-sized facilities and industries, to be able to make those investments. If the investments don't happen, industry will not be here because clearly we're transitioning. And if it's not profitable for them to ultimately do business here because they haven't been able to reduce or decarbonize their facilities as we move into this regime, survival is not there. And so those are the two areas that I would say is we focus on investment and innovation for domestic industry.
And it sounds like you're saying it's really three I's: investment, innovation, and incentives.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. So,
May I add another
oh, yes, please.
element to that?
Yes, please.
Basically, what we're doing is we're competing with the government of China as such. American industry, when they compete with China, is not a Chinese company. They're competing with the Chinese government. What we require, I believe, is a national overarching policy, for example, on advanced technology products. Last year, we ran 192 in 500 advanced technology products. The preponderance of that came from China. When you take a look last year at trade, global trade in advanced technology products, China exported more than $600 billion. We were fifth in the world at $171 billion. Now, the Chinese engaged in a strategic policy to control not only the rare earths, the 17 rare earths, they're in a strategic policy to control key technologies such as semiconductors. What we need is an across the board advanced technology product agenda. We need to be in a position where we simply say, if you're going to sell advanced technology products, particularly the critical ones, that you're going to make them in the United States. It really doesn't matter who owns the company, but you must have 100% of local content. So you've got the R&D, you're training the workers, and ideally you'd have at least 2 suppliers in that. So we do that, we link it with our universities, we link it with our research, and we have a holistic whole of government approach. The difficulty that we have now is we have a trade policy that doesn't recognize this, and we have a policy as we're dealing with it in bits and drabs here and there in various departments. We need a whole of the government approach and a whole of the government strategy on advanced technology products. It will create hundreds of thousands of new jobs in the process and better secure our national security.
Thank you. And in my final 30 seconds, I want to just ask Dr. Kirkus, even though life cycle emissions for solar and wind are far lower than coal and fossil fuels, manufacturing clean energy source technologies like PV panels still generates some emissions. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory found that 60 to 70% of a solar panel's life cycle emissions come from upstream processes like extraction, materials extraction and manufacturing. How can we reduce these upstream emissions, and what kind of R&D is already out there looking at this challenge?
So in terms of reducing it, really, we do see it. We do see a lot of the carbon capture techniques or capabilities that we are developing here at Oak Ridge and at some of our other national laboratories to ensure that as you are producing something, that you are capturing the carbon, you're actually recycling the carbon, sequestering the carbon. So there's a lot of good work there. The other thing, of course, is that as we look at really improving the capability of these solar panels, for example, or the wind turbines, for example, their lifetime expands further out. So if I double my lifetime, really the carbon impact is 50%. It really reduces it down. So improved product as well as processes that are low carbon emission and actually capturing that carbon would be are the great way to go. And this is the direction that we are moving. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Congressman Wasserman Schultz, and I hope that our witnesses will provide to the record, Dr. Choate, the various trade accounts that you referenced in your answer to Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz, where you feel that in terms of advanced technologies that we are falling behind. And then I wanted to ask Ms. Brown if she could provide to the record. She's not appearing on my screen right now. I hope she's there.
I'm here.
Okay, you mentioned in your opening remarks an infrastructure bank. I'm very interested in your submitting to the record how you think that should be structured. We have loan programs at the Department of Energy and so forth, and I'll be honest with you, I've been reflecting a lot on the role of the Department of Energy in helping to finance some of what we are doing going forward. So I'd be interested in reading that proposal, and I know our members would as well. We are going to now go to Congresswoman Frankel of Florida.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the panel. My question is sort of a follow-up to yours, Madam Chair. since we are the funding committee, appropriations subcommittee, I would like to ask each of you if you could, give me your priorities of what we should fund. Where should we put our money, the United States Congress? Who would like to start?
I'll kick off.
Yeah.
I'll be fairly quick about it. The bottom line are facilities like the manufacturing demonstration facility, where we can take next generation or newest generation technology, really scale it up. So we're talking benchtop type of capabilities and so forth, scale it up for use, not only as, and again, Ms. Brown continues to hit this on the nail on the head, not only for the big companies, but also for the small, medium-sized enterprises that are really the backbone of manufacturing. So the ability, invest in facilities like this that really reach out and provide us with the funding that allows us to engage our key industry sectors and move them forward. That would be a really critical opportunity and a great opportunity, not only for Oak Ridge, but for all of the national labs and a lot of our government entities out there. Thank you.
So just to follow up on that, would that be through a grant process, a direct appropriation? What are you recommending?
So, and it's a great question. One of the ways that we fund our partnerships with industry. Now, there are some that are direct grants who say, yes, we really need to work in this area. This is important for the nation to move it forward. The other way is a company will come to us and say, hey, we are moving forward in certain technologies. So you see the big 3D printer behind me. That was with Lincoln Electric. That's a CRADA, a Cooperative Research and Development Agreement, and we have funding. If Lincoln says we're going to work on this, they send us the system and so forth, and that's part of their cost share, their engineering is cost share. Department of Energy matches it dollar for dollar to fund us to work with them. They supply about 80% of their technical know-how, but we've got 20% of some unbelievable technical know-how that they just don't have, and so we can apply that, really de-risk it for them, help them to move it forward. This gives us flexibility to meet what U.S. industry is looking to grow in. So that there are a couple of different avenues there. One is, where does the government want us to go? The other one is really, what is industry voting for with their wallet and signing CRADAs with us? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brown, do you have recommendations?
Sure. It was already mentioned that it would be great to have an infrastructure bank, and that's something that we think would be wholly beneficial to domestic manufacturers. But two other areas. I mentioned before carbon capture and storage, as well as DAC, direct air capture. Those are two technologies that are very clear would be very beneficial to industries like steel and cement and fertilizers and refining in the United States. So I think funding more direct loans or grants through DOE to help get that stuff off the ground and at a deployable scale would be tremendously beneficial. But that's also, just one piece of it. We had the 45Q tax credit that was expanded. We also really need to fund building out the infrastructure for carbon capture. That has not been done to a sufficient level. And I keep thinking in my mind, because there are no domestic producers, especially in the steel industry, that are using carbon capture technology. And I keep thinking in my mind that if we build it, they will come, right? And so we have the tax credit that tries to attract. We have these programs at the Department of Energy that would seek to, fund a little bit of this technology some more, but we also need to have the infrastructure built out throughout the country to actually move the carbon that is sequestered through this technology. So I feel if we build it and we fund, these core pieces, then industry will look to these technologies as viable, because right now they don't.
Thank you. Dr. Choate?
Well, I would say I would look for some basic opportunities that can immediately move to create jobs. First, I would recommend doing a national energy capital budget, where you go to the cities and you find out what kinds of energy projects that they have, where there are deficits, and then lay out a plan to deal with that. I would recommend going with heat capture. This is a brand new technology. It's commercialized, it's ready. I would work with cities to try to reduce their carbon emissions 20, 30%. I would design a program around an infrastructure bank to deal with that. I would invest monies in new materials. to move those forward. Those are some of the things that I think fall within your purview.
Thank you. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Sorry about that. I can never put the arrow exactly where it goes yet on the screen. I'll mention to the guests, our witnesses, that Congresswoman Frankel is a former mayor. So I watched her listen to those answers very, very carefully. And I will just inform the panelists that I represent a lot of refineries, and nobody has reached out from anywhere to try to help us capture what is being emitted, other than through EPA regulations. So if there's new technology out there, it hasn't arrived where I live, and I doubt that it has arrived in adjacent states that also have a lot of refineries. All right, now let's see, who's next here? We are at Congresswoman Bustos, please.
All righty, thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate you holding this hearing. You're doing a wonderful job of really enlightening us on so many important issues as it pertains to energy and water. And I want to thank our witnesses for testifying also today. Today's a pretty important day from my perspective, in that Congressman Vesey and McKinley and I introduced the bipartisan, I always love being able to say that, bill called the Storing CO2 and Lowering Emissions Act. And because we like acronyms, we call it the SCALE Act. And what it would do, this flows perfectly into this discussion that we're having around Lois Frankel's question that she just asked. It would make critical infrastructure investments in carbon capture and storage, so we can have net zero emission, an economy driven by that. So the SCALE Act is estimated to directly and indirectly create nearly 13,000 jobs per year over each of the next 5 years. And I'm from the state of Illinois. We in our state would be 4th in the nation in terms of new jobs created as a result of this legislation. That's why I'm pretty excited about it. So Ms. Brown, I have a question for you. You started hinting at this just a little bit with Lois Frankel's question, but can you speak to the benefits that the SCALE Act would have in terms of jobs for steel workers? And specifically, I'd like to learn more about the indirect impact this legislation from your perspective when it comes to things like feeder lines and facilities that would be associated with a large-scale transport infrastructure system.
Definitely. And thank you so much for the question, Congresswoman. I think, again, this is an extension of what we were just talking about before, about building out the infrastructure to support technologies like carbon capture. And, right now it's completely absent. And we're strong supporters of the SCALE Act, so we really appreciate your leadership there. For our union, I think the jobs benefit would be in a few places. Where the steelworkers, we make steel pipe. And there would be a tremendous potential benefit to steelworker jobs in the United States who are making domestic steel pipe to actually have their products used in the infrastructure to build out these carbon pipelines. So that's one. But in terms of constructing the pipeline itself, you mentioned the trunk line. That would be roughly between 1,200 to 1,500 jobs. Rhodium recently did a study that really broke down the jobs numbers associated with scaling out, no pun intended, the carbon infrastructure. And that was one of the projected job numbers that they put out there. In terms of the operation jobs of the trunk line, it would be between 8 and 20. The feeder lines would be about 200 to 370 jobs in terms of getting that going. The steel, in terms of the steel mills and carbon capture, the jobs that would be associated with creating a carbon capture system at a steel mill would be about 3,000. So there are huge opportunities kind of directly and indirectly in terms of the actual construction, the downstream in terms of the manufacture of the pipe, but then also the operation of the system once it's up and running.
Yeah, that's significant. Great to hear. And anytime we can create union jobs, we're all in. So we're excited about that. I think I have time to ask, and we'll get an answer in the remaining time. But the Energy Act that obviously passed and was signed into law at the end of last year, it authorized $775 million for demonstrations, pilots, front-end engineering and design studies. into deploying carbon capture at power and industrial facilities. In the congressional district that I represent, we have 7 biofuel refineries that are scattered in and around our congressional district. So for the broader group, how do you see these robust investments in retrofitting some of our industrial facilities like steel mills and ethanol refineries, bolstering our domestic manufacturing capacity? And if you could talk about how that would affect job retention and creation. And again, this could be for the broader group. How about if I call on Tom Kerfus?
Sure, I was just about to hit my unmute button there. So I mean, I think basically what this does once again is it makes us more competitive, because the bottom line is we see new technology and so forth, and the way that we could really move forward on this is again to leverage the capability of places like the national labs that really do have centralized R&D capability. Again, hub and spoke. Let us work with our industry partners, and we're not going to work in a vacuum. We're working together to see what understand what works, and then let's get it out to the spokes to make sure it's being utilized accordingly and so forth. And then it also continues in terms of what should the new materials be, how do we want to refine it. Part of my operation is all on the chemical processing side and the petrochemical side, and so a lot of the biofuel. So there's a lot of work that could be done there to really help it move forward, including things like sensors. We could measure some of the quantities that people said, well, we just don't quite know what we should be looking for or how to do it. Once we can start to measure it, it's like your O2 sensor on your car. Once you have that thing working and they figured that one out, we can do a lot of things in terms of emissions control and so forth. So just a better understanding of what we have, leveraging our really powerful national lab and university system to really move this forward. Let us take some of the heavy lift out of it so we can move some of these facilities forward.
As much as I would love to hear other people respond to this, my time is up and I will yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Bustos, and congratulations on introducing your bill. And I know many of us will want to get on it. I hope all of us. And as I listen to your concerns, as I listen to many members, as I listen to these brilliant witnesses, I'm saying to myself, some of this is going to be done by public financing, some is going to be done by private financing, some is going to be done by a joint capability. And what is the role of the Department of Energy in all of this? And as we think about a green infrastructure bank, we think about infrastructure banks, there's climate banks, there's so many different proposals out there. I hope that our witnesses and our members are thinking, what is the role of the Department of Energy as a partner in financing some of these new technologies where we have technical expertise and not just accounting expertise. So start thinking hard about what this looks like as we move forward with Build Back Better. All right, we're going to go to Congresswoman Watson Coleman. I understand there's a photo that Congresswoman Spear is planning for those of us who just voted on the Equal Rights Amendment, and I'm not quite sure where it is, but I just wanted to inform those listening.
Thank you, Madam Steps, just so you know.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to the witnesses. An advantage to being one of the last questioners is that you get to learn a lot, but your questions also get to be asked. But let me turn your attention to just sort of jobs in general. Dr. Kerfus and Mr. Cortez in particular both spoke to the fact that there were jobs available. Mr. Cortez, you spoke to that in terms of your industry, and Mr. Kerfus, Dr. Kerfus, you talked about it in terms of manufacturing industry in general. I'm interested in knowing what kind of jobs we're talking about, what kind of experience, what kind of education and training are we looking for people to fill these jobs? So if you could just tell me quickly some of the categories of jobs.
Sure, absolutely. So with respect to our industry, the types of jobs are very vast. So all the way from scientists and engineers and individuals doing R&D, all the way to the implementation of the product through into manufacturing. And then as far as beyond that, even into installation. So we have well over 100 refueling stations across the country with our customers. And those installations require trades and millwrights and electricians and folks that actually know how to install the equipment. And we've actually utilized quite a bit of individuals from the oil and gas industry who are trying to look at how they can make a change from their current industry that they're working into a clean energy environment. So we are creating many green collar jobs, but the vastness of what we can provide in terms of all of that expertise, but also the high tech positions as well in terms of the development and the R&D is very important to us. So we're looking for those new positions that I mentioned before. They're very vast.
Let me just ask you really quickly about your experience in observing diversity, both women and minorities in these jobs that you all apparently pay decent salaries for.
Yes.
And are very important.
Yeah, so from a diversity standpoint, that's something that we are very, very attuned to, and we continue to look across the country to find skilled labor and a diverse workforce. We currently have plans in place to continue to look for that. We've been pretty successful. We've hired quite a few women engineers and minorities in the field, and we're going to continue to look forward.
Right. Do you have a relationship with the historically Black universities and colleges when you're recruiting?
We don't, but it's an interesting question that you ask. In my role as the Chief Technology Officer, one of the things that I want to focus on this year is our relationships with universities. And part of that is finding universities from a representation standpoint in coordination with the technology. So those two things married together, how do we take advantage of universities in the technology sectors that we're in, and also look at those diverse universities that we can pull from.
Thank you. Dr. Kerfus, same kind of questions for you.
Sure. So, I mean, I think if you take a look at it, one of the things that we're really looking at in the industrial sector is a lot of good technical savvy. What's interesting is really, you don't have to be a math or science guru or genius to really move forward in terms of what you want to do. You need to be technically savvy. So, even these kids that are not focusing in the technical area, if they understand how to use a tablet and a smartphone, they've all done a little bit of programming in Arduino and so forth. They're good to go. And so we're working with, and in fact, we work with the team over University of Tennessee, Knoxville, where they just put out some free courses. Hey, here's how you would take your current skill set and morph them over into something that a machine shop might use. And so that's worked out really well. Yeah. In terms of the HBCUs, we actually work in all of the national labs. I have to say, we have a lot of integration there and so forth. We all work very closely with the HBCUs to help move them forward and really get them going along. Our recruiting efforts, of course, we really do focus on the underrepresented groups. I have to say, we have some tremendous young female engineers, and it turns out that there are some of our best spokespeople out there. They're off there doing podcasts and so forth, and so we're working with some of the different societies. We've got Amy the engineer. She's one of the people on my staff, and the kids love her out there, and she is really being a role model, for the kids out there. See, great engagement.
Thank you. I just have a really quick question for Dr. Choate, and I just dropped my tablet, so here goes. I'm really interested in this extraction of energy from wastewater, and even the use of the water to use for air conditioning and other purposes. What stands between having this and not having? Is this something that we as a federal government ought to be investing in and making possible? Dr. Choate? Maybe I lost him.
I'm here.
Madam Chair.
Sorry. Yes. Can you hear me now, Congresswoman?
I can, yes. I'm really interested in that whole issue of extracting energy from wastewater and just repurposing any kind of waste that we have. But what you talked about was very interesting to me. How do we make this happen?
Well, first of all, the technology is developed. There's a company in Canada that is installing it in various places in Canada and the United States. What we need is to scale that up dramatically. The cost savings to cities are phenomenal. I would suggest that perhaps you and Ms. Capter could go out to the DC water and see a demonstration of it. From that point on, I earlier gave some suggestions on how to finance this thing. I think that this can be a type of technology where massive amounts of private money can be brought in, and where only a small amount of federal money is necessary brought in, and the savings are phenomenal on the fresh water. The whole question of fresh water conservation is going to be increasingly important. But this is a technology that gets you to net zero emissions immediately on your heating and air conditioning. I think it would be a priority.
Thank you. I do as well. And if I'd had a chance to talk to Ms. Brown, I'd remind her that the city of Trenton is the capital of the state of New Jersey, and where Roebling factories were. We made iron, we made steel, we made pottery, we made everything. And I just would love to make sure that my capital city becomes a positive target for reinventing itself in this new clean energy field. Thank you. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Congressman Watson Coleman. I wanted to ask a question myself, and I offer the panel, our committee, a chance to go up to DC Water. I talked to Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton last week, and she's been up there, but she agreed to join us at such time as we would want to go together. If members have a deep interest in that, I really do think it's worth the effort. I'm worried about the financing of everything as we move into a infrastructure bill, and I'm thinking about our subcommittee's work and how we include some provisions in that bill to advance these technologies that we're talking about on the clean energy front. And I wanted to ask Dr. Choate and anyone who wishes to comment if they could provide some historical context about how places like the Tennessee Valley Authority, the Appalachian Regional Commission, the power marketing authorities in the West have fueled a generation of industrial growth and community growth in those regions of the country. And most of those instrumentalities come under our subcommittee. So the question really is, can you, as I look at my region, the Great Lakes, we don't have anything like that. And we've got massive problems with nuclear power plants that are failing because of natural gas competition. We've got automotive and heavy truck and U.S. Army tank operations that are huge energy users. And we don't have the competitive energy rates. Plus, we have the problem of base power load being threatened on the nuclear front because of natural gas competition. So it's very complicated and very difficult to figure out how do you get yourself out of this cobweb. So, and go forward. So I wanted to ask about these other instrumentalities and what we can learn. And Dr. Kerfis, you live there in the Tennessee area. You might want to comment as well as we try to embed some of our thinking in the infrastructure bill that is moving forward on behalf of our Energy Appropriations Committee. Dr. Choate and then Dr. Kerfis.
Just as background, when I was working for the state of Tennessee, I was the representative for the Ozarks Commission, a commission farm. And then when I was Commissioner of Development for the state of Tennessee, I was the representative for the state for Appalachia and worked closely with the Tennessee Valley Authority. I think as you go to the future, the TVA is the model to go with, because it has an independent authority, it has significant funds, it has operational capacity. I would use the regional commission, such as the Crescent Commission, the Border Commission, et cetera. I would take the organizational structure and use it. The organizational structure there is the president appoints a co-chair, and then the involved governors appoint a co-chair. I would have a professional staff, as the Appalachian Commission has, and I would have, within the bounds of those regions, a development of long, forward-looking capital budgets, education policies that blend what the federal government and the state governments are doing, and then add supplemental funding, because more than what the country needs as a whole, those regions require. The Great Lakes has a special obligation. Those 8 states are the trustees for 90+ of fresh water. And dealing with it by individual states or just by EPA alone cannot really safeguard and clean up. In your region, you have major problems with transitioning with the older nuclear plants. A plan is going to be needed there. It needs to be a regional plan. My suggestion would be to have TVA type authorities and have a commission form of governance, have joint capital budgets with the state and the federal government and with the federal agencies, and bring real focus to what you're undertaking.
Dr. Kerfis, thank you, Dr. Choate. Dr. Kerfis?
So I think Dr. Choate has made some very good points on some of the policy sides. The other thing I would really take a look at are really what are some of the next generation of energy capability. So you have mentioned, Congresswoman, some of these big nuclear power plants, and of course they're very centralized, and that does put a lot of stress on the grid right by that plant, as it's trying to get all of that power, all of that energy out. So some of the work that's happening, for example, in solar and wind, where it's more distributed over a broader area, is very critical. And so I think that this is really a very good opportunity to try and distribute it. So now you're not loading up your grid as much, and that helps out with the grid. Of course, the other problem, and people do say this, the wind isn't blowing all the time, the sun isn't shining all the time. So somehow or other, we have to be able to store that energy so we can use it a little bit later on. So there we would actually take a look at, some of the battery technology that can store the energy for use later and try and level it out. The other one that's really very exciting is a small modular reactor. So these are reactors that are using, and in many cases, we're using things like 3D printing and so forth that allow us to build a whole next generation of reactor that might be on a 3 megawatt level and so forth, that can be used to power just a neighborhood. So again, these can be distributed around. You have a much more robust system, and it also just globally helps to keep that cost of energy at a fairly level and ultimately lower, lower price level. So you don't worry about some of these big spikes in energy when you have spikes in cost and fuel costs and so forth.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. Brown, did you have any comment on that based on what you've said about the steel industry and your associated companies?
No, I think both Mr. Kerfis and Mr. Choate had really good responses. Thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you very much. I think Ms. Lee, Congresswoman Lee, if she is no longer on. I understand that Congressman Simpson has no questions. Is that correct? Ranking member, are you there?
Yes, that is correct.
All
But I
right. very
appreciate this panel. They've been great to listen to.
All right. Hasn't it been an outstanding panel? I would agree.
Yep.
We're just glad you're Americans, and we're glad to be pulling with you. And we will leave the record open if to further answer the questions that we have. I want to thank our staff, Jamie Schimek and Scott McKee, and all those who've helped us put this together today, Matt Kaplan, and obviously on the minority side, Angie Giancarlo. And okay. So officially, this concludes the afternoon's hearing, and I would like to thank all of our witnesses for joining us today. And I ask the witnesses to please ensure for the hearing record that questions for the record and any supporting information requested by the subcommittee are delivered in final form to us no later than 3 weeks from the time that you receive them. Members who have additional questions for the record will have until the close of business on Monday to provide them to the subcommittee office. At this moment, the hearing is adjourned, and I thank you all.
Thank you.